Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of RPG Radio. On this week's episode of our Grim Dawn build series, we have got our Saboteur, which is going to be our Demolitionist Nightblade Cold and Fire Hypermobile build. This build should be dealing lots of damage, but in this particular video we're talking all about the devotions and everything you'll need, checking off the list throughout Elite, going into Ultimate. Now we're going to take 3 different branching paths to get our final devotion layout for this build, but we're going to start with our Eldritch tree, and that is our green guys. The Eldritch tree is going to combine with the Ascendant tree to get us down to our Leviathan devotion, and you'll head over to Oswin's torch to round out the fire damage in our devotions, because keeping the big 2 damage types going in opposite but equal directions is going to be important for making the most of this build. Now, I did mention Tsunami, so I will also mention that you can pick up that devotion at any point throughout this entire devotion tree, because it is the single branch deviation that you can pick up at any point. Tsunami requires that you take 5 points and drop them all into it, along with another point for your Primordial Crossroad, which is your blue, and that is going to unlock the Tsunami. Once you get it unlocked though, you're getting cold and lightning damage, which we can mostly ignore on the lightning side, but you're getting spirit and defensive ability in flat amounts as well, along with a big chunk of physique, and most importantly, the Tsunami ability. So you'll have a 35% chance on attack when you fix this to your Ring of Steel to launch the Tsunami in any number of directions at a whole bunch of enemies. It's only got a 1-second skill recharge, so you can basically get this fired off every time that you hit a Ring of Steel, and it is going to do almost half of your weapon damage, along with cold and lightning and frostburn damage on top of that. It's also got a chance to basically silence or fumble, as well as blind or impair the aim of enemies that it hits. So the Tsunami is going to be very good for the AoE damage that you'll get early on or in the late game, along with its utility options for making you more survivable when hitting enemies who require ability usage or just to punch you square in the face. This build does have some problems with the health bar and being squishy, so since we're not one of those big tanky two-handed builds, things are going to get a little bit rough, and you're going to have to do a lot of moving in and out to get all that survivability that you need for having such a teeny tiny health bar. Now, if you're more interested in getting your big 2 devotions out of the way earlier on, you can start with the Eldritch tree, and that is your single point into your crossroads of green, and that's going to get you a little bit of offensive ability, but that will unlock the ability to take constellations such as Quill and Hawk. If you want to start off with Quill to open up your Ascendant path, go ahead and do that. This is going to be an investment in both the Eldritch and Ascendant path, which are required for your Leviathan. But Quill, just like the last build that we did, is going to be giving you elemental damage, aether resistance, flat health, and a big bump to your flat energy, as well as a percent increase to that energy bar too. You're also getting a percent increase of 2% to your defensive ability, so even though we don't have a whole lot on this build, any kind of percent increase on the bigger numbers that we can get is going to be helpful for not getting smacked out of existence by one big angry Yeti guy in Act 3. With the Quill out of the way though, you can move on to a number of different options, but the easiest one is going to be your Spider. Spider is a 5 devotion point requirement constellation, and it is going to give you Spirit and Cunning for your first point. You're going to get an increase of 3% to your entire spirit bar as well, along with offensive ability. You're getting casting speed, attack speed, and defensive ability, with another 3% cunning increase as well. Cunning is a big stat for this build because it is one of those builds that really needs to hit people hard and make sure that the crits are doing enough damage. So that being said, cunning is a big attribute that we're going to need, and we really have to divvy up our focus between physique and cunning to strike a good balance between survivability and the extremely ridiculous amounts of damage that we can do. Now, once you have those 2 devotions out of the way, coupled with your Crossroads devotion, you should have a 10 Eldritch Affinity, which unlocks your first extremely big damage spike for devotions. This devotion, the Magi, is a very big buy-in at, it looks like, 7 points, but the ability and the stats that this is going to give you are extremely useful for big wave clear and doing lots of damage in an AoE on a concentrated point. It is crazy just how good the Magi Fissure is for helping you clear a room. That being said, you're also getting buffs to fire damage, you're getting elemental resistance, which is fantastic for any build, you're getting more defensive ability, another chunk of physique, along with both attack and casting speed at 50%. You're getting burn damage to make sure that our fire component has a dot effect as well. You're getting energy regen from this constellation, which is something that may not feel very important right away, but I promise you, once you start getting that cooldown reduction on your abilities and you start spamming them as much as you really want to, you'll have some energy problems. So being able to click all of your buttons all the time is always a good reason to have more energy regen, more energy coming from our quill, and just being able to tap those buttons as much as humanly possible. After the energy regen though, you're getting flat bumps to fire damage as well as more buffs to the fire damage pool itself. So increasing the ceiling to make sure, or increasing the floor of fire damage to make sure that the ceiling can go even higher. You're also getting a reduction to freeze duration, which isn't a stat that you're going to see a whole lot unless you're finding it on gear or very specific devotions and skills. But freeze duration is just as useful as stun reduction duration, because if you're hunting yourself a big nemesis by the name of Musalwaki the Chillwind, you're going to want to be able to not be frozen for as long as possible to make sure that you can just live through any of the damage that he does. Specifically, if you get frozen while you are face tanking Moose, you're probably going to get punched in the face and die very quickly. Magi also gives you a bump to your, or a flat bump to your burn damage, so you're increasing the floor of your burn damage pool as well while getting the ceiling buffed. And finally, the ability that comes along with Magi is the Fissure. You've probably seen it plenty in the videos at this point because it is very easy to activate, even though we have it only on a 15% chance while it is bound to Fire Strike. Because we've got such a decent amount of attack speed on this build, Fire Strike activates very often, or Fissure activates very often because of the Fire Strike. That being said, it's only on about a 2-second cooldown, it has a 5-second duration, and it is going to basically shoot a little volcano up under the target that you are hitting, dealing a whole bunch of fire and burn damage with a 25% chance to stun the target for 1.5 seconds. That is incredibly easy to get as well, because the number of little fireballs that this volcano is shooting out activate that chance. So you're basically guaranteed to stun anyone standing on top of the fissure for a good chunk of time, unless they have a whole bunch of stun duration reduction like we do. With that being said though, between Fissure and Tsunami, you have 2 forms of damage in both cold and fire that you can activate with your big 2 abilities, meaning Ring of Steel and Fire Strike, and you can clear rooms incredibly efficiently with just those 2 devotions. That being said, we're not even halfway to getting our Leviathan devotion completed, which is going to be another huge jump in our cold damage, so let's keep going. Now, once you've finished up the Magi, you can go ahead and complete your Eldritch tree by taking the Hawk constellation. Hawk has a 3-point requirement, and it is going to give you, as well as giving you 3 points worth of Eldritch affinity. So once you take Hawk, you'll be getting offensive ability, you're going to get increased crit damage, which is another very good stat for this build because we are looking to deal as much crit damage as possible with that Ring of Steel, which means that we may still want to pick up Circle of Slaughter if we have extra points going into Ultimate, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. The 3rd point that you'll get from Hawk is going to give you a 3% offensive ability bump to your entire offensive ability pool, and that is fantastic for all the reasons I've already mentioned in this video, so you don't need to hear them again. Go back and pay attention if you weren't. There is also a reduction for cunning requirement for ranged weapons, but seeing as how we're a dual-wielding, melee-slapping ninja cowboy from the future, I don't really think that stat requires a whole lot more mention. And that's it. The Hawk is done, and we can move on to our Ascendant devotions, our purple guys, the guys that we need to get over to Leviathan, and these ones are going to be quite a bit more unassuming. They are the Clark Kents to your Eldritch tree's Superman. So, that being said, since we have the points into Quill, we're already getting 3 for our Ascendant tree, and we need 10 more to get Leviathan unlocked. So, we're going to head over to Harpy, which is going to give us 5 Ascendant affinity towards that Leviathan constellation, and that means that we're more than halfway there. Harpy is going to give you offensive ability a little bit more than the devotions that we've been getting so far. You're getting bleeding resistance of about 10%, which is great because bleeding is something that is pretty easy to stack up, but it can sneak up on you if you're not paying attention to it. It's also giving you flat bumps to cunning and energy regen, which are both stats that are a little bit sleeper necessary, but cunning always a good thing, and energy regen always a good thing for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Now you're getting some flat piercing damage from this as well, which is a thing that you're going to see throughout gear and other abilities that this build takes. Piercing is kind of the unofficial third damage type of this build. It doesn't get a lot of recognition, but it does show up enough that it is good. So ignoring it is fine, but you'll always know that it's there and it is helping out. We're also getting another bump to our crit damage, making that even better, and we're getting a buff to our cold damage ceiling because that buffed stat can really take off pretty quickly with all of these devotions alone. So, that being said, Harpy is only a 4-point investment for 5 points worth of Ascendant affinity, and that'll lead us right on down to the second Ascendant constellation, which is our Empty Throne. Now, if you've watched any of the build guides on this channel before and you see me going towards a cold focus build, I'm probably going to pick up Empty Throne just because of all the defensive options that it comes with. It's not flashy, but it is going to do a lot to raise all of your defensive stats, especially if they are in the gutter, like a lot of people like to leave them. So your first point, you're going to get some defensive ability and slow resistance, making sure that our melee character has the ability to walk towards people if we're all out of movement. We're also getting more defensive ability after that, along with some small pierce resistance of 8%. And you're going to go on after that to either take 10% chaos resistance and 25% stun duration reduction, or you're going to get reduced freeze duration of the same 25% or 10% aether resistance. Obviously you'll pick them all up because you need to fill out the entire Empty Throne, but the Empty Throne itself is so full of very hard to find defensive stats for your late game grinding that it is almost impossible to skip this with everything that it provides. So again, if you're looking for any devotions in the Ascendant tree, if you're making a cold build and you're going towards Leviathan, Empty Throne is an almost guaranteed requirement as far as devotions and constellation go for keeping you alive. 100% 10 out of 10 would recommend. Now that being said, with Empty Throne out of the way, we have achieved our 13 affinity requirement for Leviathan, so there's a couple stats down there that we can talk about. You do not have to complete Leviathan all the way though. If you want to skip 2 of the, basically the end 3 points that you can get in this constellation, you can start focusing on getting over towards Oswin's torch a little bit quicker. But if it feels like the damage is a little bit lacking on your cold and frostburn detail, you can pick these up earlier and you should feel at least somewhat a significant jump in the damage that you can do with cold focused abilities. That being said, your first point with Leviathan is going to give you an increased flat cold damage, so you're buffing that floor as well as getting 80% to the ceiling, so you're buffing that entire pool and the floor all in 1 point. After that, you're getting a big chunk of physique of 35, and you're getting an 8% increase to your entire health bar, which is severely necessary because your health bar with this build is very small. The third point is going to give you 10% to your entire energy bar. I don't think I really need to mention anymore why that's good. And then you're getting a defensive ability along with more energy regen. Really, Leviathan is just checking all the boxes that we want for this build, making sure that we are stocked on energy, we're doing the right amounts of damage, and we're gonna make ourselves a little bit harder to kill with our puny little health bar. After that, though, the next point is going to give you 5% physical resistance, which is chef's kiss, looking towards ultimate. You're getting 20% pierce and vitality resistance for this build just from Leviathan as well. And take it from me, pierce resistance is tough to come by as I was going into elite with the Saboteur. So that being said, keep all of the gear that you find with decent pierce resistance on it. If you can avoid swapping it out, you're going to be a lot happier going into elite because pierce damage is pretty prevalent, especially in the earlier acts of the game. Specifically Act 2, a lot of the bandits, a lot of the like skeletal archers will do some insane amounts of piercing damage at range and up in your face, and they can just annihilate you if you get caught in the wrong CC. So get your pierce resistance up. It may be one of the things that's contributing to a lot of your deaths if you are stuck in Act 2. After that, there are 3 more points that we're going to put into Leviathan, but the first is going to unlock our ability to use the Whirlpool. Whirlpool is a huge AoE of cold and frostburn damage that just sits on the ground and deals damage for 6 seconds. It's only got a 2-second cooldown, so you could potentially have quite a few of these whirlpools going on at any given time, but we're going to equip the whirlpool to our Bladed Rifts ability, and this isn't one that is going to come up through your Nightblade or your Demolitionist tree. This is a metal ability you're going to want to get as soon as you hit level 50. You need some Eldritch Essence, and you need to go talk to a blacksmith to pick up the Bladed Rifts. Bladed Rifts is a point-and-click teleport ability that you'll be seeing all over the video so far, but when you land, you shoot out a bunch of knives, and you're going to reduce the defensive ability of the targets that you hit in that AoE. So this ability in and of itself is incredibly good to combo with Ring of Steel because they both hit in about the same method of AoE, and you can dive in with Bladed Rifts, use your Ring of Steel, and then follow up with your Nightfall, your Shadow Strike to do even more damage while that defensive ability is lower. That being said, when you equip Whirlpool to your Bladed Rift, you are going to have a 100% chance to activate the Whirlpool when the rift hits. So basically, every time that you teleport with your Q button, you're going to get a Whirlpool under the enemy that you have teleported to, and you can just watch it shred them, slow them, and make things generally easier to deal damage to them. That being said, the final 2 points in Leviathan will get you another big buff to your cold damage floor and ceiling, as well as your frostburn floor and ceiling, with some increased maximum cold resistance. You actually get 3% bump to the resist ceiling, so you can get, with just Leviathan, 83% cold resistance, which is really, really helpful. Upping that resistance ceiling is incredibly good for staying alive in the face of lots of angry, cold magic damage. And because of the devotions that we have the 15 Eldritch required, even though we're going to take 1 point out of our crossroads. So Spider gives you 6 affinity, Quill gives you 3, Hawk gives you another 3, so that's 12 right there, and then Magi is going to give you another 3, bumping us all the way up to 15. So what we have to do now is take our Chaos Tree and get it up to the easiest number in the world, which is 8. That is going to start by putting 1 point into your Chaos Crossroads to unlock them. You're going to remove that point later so you can put it back into Oswin's Torch, but in order to start things, you're going to take that 1 point and unlock Jackal. Jackal is going to be 3 points of devotion for 3 points of affinity towards our 8-point goal. And that means that 6% of energy, 6% total speed, along with some offensive ability and 2% physical resistance is going to get us about halfway for our Oswin's Torch with some decent stats along the way. After Jackal, you're going to look to the Vulture, which is a bigger investment, but we're also getting 5 points exactly worth of Chaos Affinity, and that's the number that we're looking for. You're going to start by getting 15 Cunning and Spirit, bumping up those damage attributes for us quite a bit. You're going to get 15 offensive ability with life leech resistance, as well as 15% bleeding resistance, so you're harder to steal health from, and bleeding damage is just going to not mean anything to this build later on, I promise. After that, you have a threefold path. You can either take a flat bump to your health and energy bar with some more offensive ability. You can take vitality and chaos resistance in diminishing values along with some more offensive ability, or you can get a percent increase to your cunning and spirit with, again, some offensive ability. Vulture is absolutely rampant with really strong stats, so the 5-point buy-in it's pretty effective. It's pretty efficient considering you're getting 5 out and you're getting a lot of really good stats for an offense-oriented build with some pretty good resistances stuck in there too. So, that being said, once you have those 2 constellations, turn right back around, take your Chaos Crossroads out, and start dumping points into Oswin's Torch. Oswin's Torch is going to start out by giving you 20 offensive ability and a buff to your fire damage ceiling of 80%. Your next point is going to give you 5% of your offensive ability funneled right back in. Oswin's Torch really ready to make sure that you can deal big damage. On top of that 5% offensive ability, you're getting 15% chaos resistance, which is tough to come by again. But after that, you're getting buffs to crit damage and movement speed, which isn't something that we see a lot in these devotions. And then you're going to take the left fork so that we can get 1 point closer to the meteor shower ability at the end of the torch. Before you get there though, you'll get a 100% bonus to your burn damage ceiling with an increased duration, along with a bump of 6% to your entire health bar, which is sorely needed. And then Meteor Shower itself, when you unlock it, it is going to do exactly what you think it will. It will rain down meteors, doing physical and fire and burn damage in a very big area, absolutely incinerating everything around. The other 2 points that you'll pick up here are going to give you a flat fire damage with a buff to your fire damage ceiling yet again, and you're going to get the same treatment to your burn damage with a buff to the flat burn damage itself, and the ceiling of the burn damage is going to be increased. You're also going to reduce the stun duration while you have this point in, and you're getting a 3% maximum fire resistance buff to the fire resistance cap. So, all that being said, fantastic passive stats all over the place, big bumps to your crit and your offensive ability opportunities, all rolled into a nice tasty taco with the Meteor Shower. Oswin's Torch and Leviathan are extremely powerful devotions, and when used together, they do a whole lot of damage in a very big area, making sure that enemies do not get away. That being said, that is everything for the devotions for this build, everybody. Your Saboteur is almost completed. We have one more video next week to round this guy out with gear and ultimate, but I will see you all there. Peace out, everybody.